Hi, I'd like to say how much I've enjoyed the panel. I hope some of the papers and the comments will be put online somewhere. It would be great to see that, particularly the systems for declassification, etc., etc. My name's Michael Hopkins. I'm from the University of Liverpool. You've been bemoaning, quite rightly, I think, some of the delays in the publication of the foreign relations volumes, but believe you me, it is paradise compared with the situation in Britain, with the documents on British policy overseas, and I've had many debates with people in the Foreign Office about this. I have two questions. The first is related to how you treat overseas documents. I'm thinking in particular of my own country. So very often there will be very confidential discussions, and it's interesting. I didn't know about the NSA website, about the study on signals intelligence, about the 1948 UCUSA agreement about sharing signals intelligence from GCHQ prior to the setting up of NSA. So I'm wondering how you handle that and whether there are difficulties in releasing documents in the volumes for British documents. And if you do that, do you have the same principle as you have for agencies? Will they allow you to describe the document, or you just have to say that there were some documents covering British thinking? My second question is a more technical question. One of the problems with moving into new technology is technology becomes obsolete. Certainly in the taping systems in the early 20th century, in the Second World War onwards, we have very primitive taping systems. What about these now out-of-date computer systems? I speak from experience about doing a PhD and on disks that are completely unusable now because of the different types of system, the kind of primitive computer stroke typewriters. I wonder if you'd comment on those two. Thank you.
Oh, sure. I had a lot of documents that had British equities because I was dealing with Southern Africa, and it goes through the exact same process. When we identify whoever has equities in these documents, and then governments have a chance to look at that and see whether or not they want to release their part of that. So they could literally redact or refuse to declassify documents in which they have significant equities. A lot of times governments no longer exist, and so that's less of a problem, but I don't think Britain's going anywhere. So we definitely check not only with the British government, but also with desk officers around the globe to see how that might impact our relations with other countries.
Let me say, actually, before we go beyond governments don't exist anymore, that in fact, in many cases, the fact that a government doesn't exist is not taken into account in continuing to maintain secrecy. This is very true in the subject of the war in Southeast Asia, in which governments that don't exist, arguments don't sway our own people in making decisions about declassifying material about those wars. But in any case, let me speak a little bit to the technology issue. Also, the Southeast Asian War provides an excellent example. For example, we compiled enormous numbers of statistics about what was the status of the pacification of villages in South Vietnam. And we had a regular machine searchable database that was set up on a type of computer that was current at that time, which used magnetic tapes. And special magnetic tape drives were created for the purpose of accessing this material. Gerhard, I believe, is author of studies that ponder, that reflect on the impact of changing technology on the capacity to handle and store information. And this is a perfect example of that, because at a certain point in time, the National Archives had these magnetic tapes with all of the data from all of the pacification surveys of South Vietnam, and we had no computer that was capable of reading them. Same thing happened with the belt recordings of presidential telephone calls that were taken on dictaphone machines in the 1950s going into the 1960s, where we had Eisenhower and John Kennedy on dictaphone belts discussing things over the telephone, and then we had no machine that was able to read those materials. So when we talk about Twitter and when we talk about Facebook inputs and when we talk about emails and all these new varieties of acquisition of material that we're talking about, where the amount, the volume of the material mushrooms the way it does, our ability to access that material and process that material is going to be exponentially more difficult.
John, can I jump in really quickly before you talk about the technological obsolescence? Or were you going to?
I'm done.
Okay.
Just jump right in.
I just wanted to make a kind of connect some historical points here really quickly. On your question on foreign government documentation, I was thinking immediately of the Yalta volume in the Foreign Relations series, which was a scandal in itself when it came out. The State Department had collected the volume on the Yalta and Malta negotiations as a part of its Foreign Relations series process, and the British government was resisting the release of it. And of course, Congress, and particularly Republicans in Congress, wanted the release of the volume. And in fact, in this tortured history at the time, the galley proofs were leaked to the New York Times. And so this connects your comments, Professor Weinberg, on the AHA, because this scandal and the accusations of politicization of the series led to the creation of an advisory committee to give some scholarly authority to decisions about inclusion and selection in the series. Any other questions from the field?
Could I just pursue my...
Yes, please.
I don't want to hog this, but I'm interested to know whether particular governments are particularly difficult, whether, for example, the French government, the German government, or the British government are particularly difficult about the discussions they have. There have been, at the end of the Cold War, for example, all kinds of discussions. I'm thinking, in my own country, United Kingdom, it'd be interesting to know what exchanges there were between the Baker administration and Mrs. Thatcher about unification of Germany. And there must be all kinds of little records and comments that the British probably don't want. And I wonder whether the British are particularly resistant. As it is my impression that they often are resistant about rather trivial things. And in British records, you often have records kept secret for a very long time, and that all they are personality reports, and they make a rather disparaging comment about James Burns, and you get to see it in 2005 rather than any sooner.
To me, it's more issue-driven than government-driven, and a lot of it is based on how is this going to make us look. And that's certainly the case with the United States as well. We've had documents denied because they just didn't want particular information coming out that made, say, Kissinger look bad or something like that. So I think it's, issue by issue rather than governments being particularly difficult with declassification. But the British are difficult.
Let me say something else. You used the word at one point equity, and I'm surprised no one else has followed up on that, because this is a central equity issue. And my official colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, and I may very well be. But my understanding of the way that this works is that it's very different from the agency point of view in the United States government as it is from the intergovernment point of view. That is to say that when it's a matter of, let's say, a United States government record that happens to be a memorandum of conversation with a foreign official, like the Foreign Minister of France, for example, to take your example, we will automatically just exclude the material that is from the side of the French foreign minister because it's foreign government information. And then at some point, that foreign government information becomes accessible, but there isn't any sending of the document to the French government that asks the French government, well, is it okay with you if we release that? Whereas, if the Central Intelligence Agency can claim that information in the document that you're looking at originated from them, they actually get to pass on the document, and they get to make a determination about whether you can or cannot release the information that's in your document that supposedly came from them. So there is an affirmative action taking place there, whereas in the case of the foreign government information, there isn't a process. Is that correct?
That has not been my experience, no. My experience has been that it goes through the exact same process, that once government agency is clear on that, then that information does go to whatever foreign government is involved. And that information is not removed summarily until it's reviewed.
If I could step in here, when information is created, so today, Dr. Prados is a British citizen right now, and I'm the U.S. citizen, and we're having a discussion, and my decision is to classify the information. Yes, the order allows for that to be classified. 25 years from now, the order does have a change from the earlier order. And there's a role for the Secretary of State here that says that essentially says the Secretary of State shall talk with those governments to determine whether the information should remain classified longer than 25 years. So I can tell you on a practical level, when the matter of this U.S.-UK signals agreement came before the panel, this was a discussion that did occur between the two governments. The panel made an informed and educated decision in consultation with the British government on deciding what to do in this case. But there is an element of the executive order that does have the Secretary of State having a role to talk with those governments for historical information.
Well, we're nearing the end of our time, and I wanted to make special mention of thanks to Professor Lerner for collecting information that's very useful for us in the history office.
Yeah, but it's
at the State
classified.
Department.
You're not going to get to see it, Nathaniel.
And, you know, I'm not going to attempt to address all of the recommendations or would-be criticisms as they stand. But one thing I think would be useful for the audience would be to hear about our new website, because with apologies to the University of Wisconsin, I don't think their website was designed for smart searching on the early 19th century foreign relations series. But this is a big commitment that we've made in our office to enable smart keyword searching for the Fruce volumes, and we're currently in progress for loading all of the series from the first volume in 1861 through the current time. So hopefully that will address some of the complaints.
Can I just add something about
Certainly.
how long it takes to get these volumes out? I do want to stress that while it takes compilers a certain number of years to get this out, that's where our control of these volumes ends. And once it gets farmed out to these various agencies, it's like it goes into a parallel universe sometimes. I completed my Southern Africa volume in 2005. I just got the pages in 2010. And it's this back and forth negotiations for getting documents and information released that takes an incredible amount of time. But I believe in the end, it makes for a better volume. Does it take a little longer? Yes. But you're going to see some incredible 40 committee meetings that I just sat there and thought, oh my God, this has to get in there. And it did. So it takes time, and it's not always because the office is dragging our heels with getting these volumes done.
Shall we preserve the last word of the session? Are there any last questions? Okay, well, it's near 1 o'clock, so thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it.